So I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Joseph Skelton, professor of pediatrics, founder and director of Brenner FIT, a program at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. FIT stands for Families in Training, which is a family-based pediatric obesity program. He's the author of a new book on children and their weight, a topic we discussed in a separate podcast. But in this podcast, we're talking about something he teaches at Wake Forest, courses in culinary medicine. This is a fascinating and pioneering area of focus, so let's dig in. There's a lot of kind of language about medicine and nutrition now. So people talk about food as medicine. There's a move afoot to get more training and nutrition and medical education. And here you are doing culinary medicine. Tell me how all these things differ from one another.
Our interest in this here at Wake Forest School of Medicine started a little organically with our program. A lot of what we do, we focus on family meals. There's decades of research showing the benefits of family meals, not only for the nutrition and obesity risk, but the quality of nutrition, time spent together, parent-child communication, kids are less likely to get pregnant or do drugs and alcohol. All these things of just spending that time together over the meal. And so inherited a small teaching kitchen that was at a local organization that someone before me had gotten funding for. And we sort of took it over and used this opportunity to teach families how to cook. And a lot of families know how to cook, but trying foods different ways and to get kids involved and things like that. And then a couple years after that, the local YMCA approached us. They had some space and wanted to do this as a partnership. So I became a fundraising machine for a year or two and took a lot of dinners to raise the funds. And we built this gorgeous teaching kitchen. And we were mainly doing it in the efforts of sort of childhood obesity treatment and prevention, getting families, teaching them new recipes, which then kind of extended to that whole key thing of getting families just to be comfortable in the kitchen and spending that time together. And we just started seeing these amazing things. We always say we've converted more kids to Brussels sprouts than I think any other effort of just getting them cooking it a different way. You and me were both probably raised with steamed Brussels sprouts, which I think is an abomination. If you really want to highlight the sulfur smell of a food, then you're going to steam it. And so we really started to do that. And then students started volunteering. Actually, it was a student, Josh Pathman. He's an emergency medicine physician now at East Carolina University and was a cook in a professional kitchen college. And he said, hey, could I help volunteer with that? And then more medical students wanted to do it. And then we all found that much like I did, I'm a self-taught cook myself. And the more time you spend in that, the more you learn, the more comfortable you are, and the more you start to know. Yeah, I can teach med students nutrition all day, but that doesn't teach them how to get nutrition on their patients' plates into their mouth. And so it really grew from there and then kind of stumbled upon what other people were doing. It started in New York, but the biggest program was really Tulane School of Medicine. It had it as a very focused way about teaching nutrition through cooking, not just on a blackboard, through PowerPoint slides and stuff like that of like, hey, let's teach it in a different way. And the old-fashioned analogy, and actually the medical educators hate this, it used to be see one, do one, teach one. That was sort of the old surgical thing. And so it's really, you got to see how to make a recipe and you got to do it yourself. And what we found that when students start then teaching each other or teaching patients or teaching community members, it really drives home and gives them a much deeper understanding of what nutrition in the real world is.
So let's talk about the need for this. If we go back in time and we think about your parents or my parents, the likelihood that meals were being prepared from the real foods rather than from a package, let's say, or in a microwave. How are things different now for the modern parent that has kept people distant from their food and where it comes from? And that's led families to be distant because they're not having meals together as much. What does that look like now?
Yeah, actually pulling from our own history, home ec is not really a thing anymore. We did this study in our own med students. Most of their cooking and nutrition, the nutrition education they're getting tends to be the popular media. They're learning it from social media. Very few students have a degree in nutrition or took a nutrition class. And as much as we have to cram into medical students' education, there's not much room for it. And they mainly learn to cook from their families. And what we know is families are cooking less and less for multiple reasons. They're much busier, especially parents of kids of all ages with that. And again, the marketing of food, it's much easier to get ready-made meals. And I'm not bad-mouthing those. We're in talks right now of actually writing a cookbook for families. And one of the things that we promise is we're going to have a chapter on assembled meals, having a pre-made salad with a rotisserie chicken. That's still going to be a better thing to do if you bring that home, sit at a table or at a bar or around a coffee table and eat that meal together. It's still going to be better for your family in multiple ways on multiple levels than eating out. And what I see it really with families right now when it comes to actually raising, quote, healthy eaters or raising good eaters is when and again, I love a good restaurant. I'm not trying to badmouth that, but when you're going out to eat a lot, kids have endless choices. And there's two issues that. One's a paradox of choice. Whatever they get, they're always going to think that other thing might have been better. And it doesn't allow them to spread their palate and try different foods and get exposed to different things. And we always laugh whenever in this field, we want to play a drinking game where every time you say complex or complexity, you take a drink. But it's such a complex issue with parents, with kids and getting meals on the table and hopefully finding some time, whether it's a breakfast or it's a dinner, but finding that time to come together around a meal.
You mentioned the paradox of choice. I was reminded at one point I downloaded this cute app called You Choose or something like that, and it would help you make a decision if you were undecided. So it would flip a coin, it would roll a dice, it would do yes, no, it would do rock, paper, scissors, it would do all these things. And I was at a restaurant once, I couldn't decide between two entrees, so I used it. I did rock, paper, scissors or something, and then it said, okay, you should choose X. So I ordered X. And the second I ordered it, I immediately thought I should have ordered Y.
Kelly, I got an even better one. Her name's Kristen Skelton, my wife. She'll tell me what I need to get if I don't have an app.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about culinary medicine. What does this course look like that you teach?
Yeah. The best way to think about it is applied nutrition. Because again, you can understand a ton about nutrition, but if that doesn't change into you getting the foods that you want in front of you, to me, it's almost theoretical or scientific. So it's applied nutrition. So it's the idea of teaching some very basic cooking skills and then including within that very core elements of nutrition. And so for us, we tend to do it by the balanced plate. We think that works really well for families, but having it be very real world, So again, we have recipes. In 2 weeks, I'm doing one. We're doing a rotisserie chicken and you're breaking it apart and making a chicken salad out of it. We were always teaching using microwavable rice. And a couple of the students cornered me and said, this is very offensive to my culture. You need to teach people how to make real rice. But so what it looks like for us is about a quarter, almost a third of med students will rotate through these classes. So it's voluntary. Next year, we're actually hopefully going to surpass half of the first year med school class.
That's unbelievable. That's very impressive.
Well, especially up until last year, I was doing this in my free time and paying for it with fundraising money. But Wake Forest is really behind this now. But about a quarter to a third of med students, they do 5 classes. And it's set up, and again, that sort of theme of that family meal. So they come in and we get stuff cooking. We get stuff in the oven, we get stuff on the stovetop. We usually take some time out for a very short lecture. Again, tends to be very practical stuff. We include a lot about social determinants of health and food insecurity. Given what I do, we talk about picky eating. Very little do we go into details about Mediterranean diet and DASH diet and some of the really core things with that. We really just try to keep it about getting that balanced plate of a protein, a starch, and a fruit or vegetable on the plate in front of you. They come back and usually finish what they're cooking, and then they sit down to eat together. And unlike when I was in med school and you were in grad school or when you were teaching, a lot of students don't go to class anymore. A lot of students, they record the lectures so they can listen to them at 1 1/4 speed and study in the best way for them. And so they thoroughly, that's the number one thing we hear is, I love getting to know my students on a different level of sitting down. And that's what my really own exposure to medical student education anymore is really through this, which to me is just the ultimate, being able to sit down, teach them some interesting things, eat a meal with them. Given my chemistry background, I love getting into the science of a lot of the stuff. And I think for them being, sort of STEM kids, it makes a lot more sense. One of my favorite things is the science of grilling, the science of garlic, things like that. And it helps them sort of understand and helps them remember that. And also peppering it with the stories. It just tends to stick that much more when they know the science, they know the story, they know the culture behind it. So it's 5 classes. It's all set up that way, that there's a short lecture. They're preparing everything they can and they're eating it. Again, we include some very easy stuff. One of the classes, we do microwavable vegetables because that's what a lot of what their patients are doing, the bagged vegetable medley. And the important thing that we teach them is Most of these don't have any seasoning. So yeah, you can microwave them, but you got to teach your patients, throw a little bit of olive oil in there, throw a pat of butter, do some salt and pepper, add some other spices to it. And they go nuts with it. One group will do some more Indian spices. One group will do more sort of traditional. One will do more Asian flavorings to it in our teaching kitchen. So it's really teaching very practical things like that. The fun part of that that's really spun onto the other things that I'll tell you about is about half of those students that do that. We have about 18 per semester, and about half those students end up volunteering with us. So they come to the classes that we have that are community focused. Now some of those students are going through lead teacher training, so they get ServSafe certified. It's awesome for me and my staff because it saves us a lot of time and overtime. That they come in, they let themselves in the kitchen, they set up, they run the class, they clean up, and they can't get enough of it. They absolutely love it.
Now, you do some celebration of different food cultures in your class. Tell us about that, including, as I understand, some of the food culture that you grew up with.
Yeah, that's a big understatement right there. We just love that. And that's a great thing. At Wake Forest being a private medical school, kids are from all over the country, from all different backgrounds. And so we absolutely sort of herald that. One of my things I love doing is class 3 is a plant-based proteins class. So the first class is a general cooking class. The second class has a focus on animal proteins. And again, we're always also cooking vegetables and fruits and starches. The third class is plant-based proteins, and I do that as Southern cooking. And I just love that sort of theme with that. So we do pinto beans, and slow cooker. We show them how to use Instant Pots, pressure cookers. We do black-eyed peas. A lot of these kids don't know that you're supposed to eat that on New Year's Day. I do a vegetarian collard green recipe taught to me by a local chef. And I think this is probably my number one post that I do on social media is cornbread night. And teaching them how to make cast iron skillet cornbread, which is the only way to do cornbread in my book, and letting them know sort of the background of a lot of the stuff. My wife's from South Carolina, so I teach them a great thing about cornbread. If you're a poor student, is you have a slice with your beans and your collard greens, and then for dessert, you put honey on it, which is what I picked up in South Carolina. So, really celebrating that stuff. We have a whole Spanish-speaking program, and we have an article written. We just haven't found the right journal for it. It says, leave my tortilla out of this. Instead of, saying, oh, you have to eat less tortillas, celebrate it. Why is that such an important part of not even that culture, but this family's food history and stuff like that? Because food is personal, it's cultural, it's family, and it's to be celebrated. We do a 4th-year elective. It's the last full elective of their 4th-year class. And a very lucky 20 students get to do that class. And we always have one called Family Night, where they bring a dish that's important to them and their family. And it could be like me, it was the roasted chicken that one of my classmates in med school cooked. And I just thought that was so exotic. I never had a whole roasted chicken before. We had a student that had spent the first part of her life in Australia. So she did pavlova and told the history about where the pavlova came from. Now that's considered sort of the national dessert of Australia. And I'll always remember this one student. He was going to emergency medicine, very quiet kid. And he's over there cooking these porridges. The only way I could describe it is just these porridges. We said, what are you doing? And he told the most amazing story. I almost tear up when I tell about it. His grandfather fled Saddam Hussein. He was Iraqi Christian and fled Saddam Hussein. And his grandfather lived with them. And this was their after school snack, was this Iraqi dish that his grandfather made. And there was a sweet one and there was a savory one. And so just stuff like that it's fantastic. I can't get enough of that. And they remember that. And so as students leave us, and I just came from match day where they found out where they're spending the next 3 to 7 years of their life. And I always say, wherever you're going, learn something about that culture and that food. If you're moving to Cincinnati, you got to learn about Cincinnati chili and Geta. Take something from that. I did all my training in Wisconsin and the Wisconsin supper clubs and how you can tell what a fresh cheese curd is. And it's just, food is fantastic. And we can take that with us wherever we go. And it can give you a way to know your patients even better. And when I hear of a family that they're from West Africa, you like jollof rice, and their face lights up and like, oh yeah, where'd you have jollof rice? So it's a great way to get to know more about people.
So there's way more to it than cooking technique. I mean, there's, you roast a chicken at this temperature for that long, or here's how long you microwave. It's really a lot more than that, isn't it?
It's just like medicine. It's science and an art. And you know that one of my most popular lectures I give does not have to do with obesity, but has to do with barbecue and all the different styles of barbecue. And what is just amazing, despite what we know about the science of taking spare ribs, which are an incredibly tough cut of meat, and you have to cook them low and slow to get that temperature up. I think it's 189 or higher where you start to get the collagen that breaks down and they turn tender. So yeah, spare ribs to be good, tender, and edible, you're talking 4 to 6 hours. But then you go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you go to Dreamland Barbecue, and they do spare ribs over live coals for an hour and a half. I sat there talking to the person doing it. I'm like, you got to do something. You must bake them ahead of time. Do you soak them? And he's just like, nope. And so again, I know the science of that. So how do these jokers do that for an hour and a half? And it turns out, in what my opinion, are the greatest spare ribs in the world.
Oh, really? I'll have to try that place out.
There's several. Birmingham has 2 there. There's several in Southeast. And they cook them for an hour and a half over live coals, violating every scientific principle of low and slow. Don't get it. It's fascinating.
It sounds really good.
Yeah.
Well, Joey, thanks very much. One final question. Do you see this, is this a movement in medicine now? Are more and more people doing this?
Yeah, it was really big for a while. Tulane had so much, they were sharing their curriculum and they were doing some good research. And that's where a lot of what you see now is the food is medicine or as medicine, where, hey, we need to find ways to get medically tailored meals into patients' hands. There's really good evidence of that with diabetes and stuff like that. And I think what you're seeing now is, I think especially with some of our efforts in the government right now, is sort of demanding more nutrition education in medical school. And I'm going to double down on culinary medicine because you know what? My students, myself, I don't need to know more about the biochemistry of carbohydrates. I need to know the biochemistry of cooking and how to do that quickly and safely to teach my patients. And also with that, we have to forget there's an entire field that's already doing this, dietetics and nutrition. And there's professionals that probably are way better at us. But I think having this increased understanding, especially dwelling in that food space, is going to help us relate to them that much more. So even though I do a lot of nutritional counseling and talking, I still use my dietitians way more. I think they're going to be way better at that. So I think there is a lot of steam building towards that, but we don't need to turn doctors into junior dietitians. But I think we can give them deeper understanding of how food and nutrition affects their health and the broader aspects of that. It's not about the biochemistry of insulin secretion. It's about where are they accessing food and how can they make use of the food pantry near them and let them know, hey, it's okay. When you open up a can of beans, it's going to smell like cat food initially. But you know what? You wash that off, and actually it's not going to taste like cat food. And, just kind of be able to work with them. Hey, canned beans are perfectly fine. Guess what? Canned beans now are coming in no salt added and low salt preparations. And here's an easy way that you can take these canned Great Northern beans, chop up some herbs with olive oil and a chunk of garlic, and you can make some fantastic bean recipe that is incredibly filling and healthy and cheap as dirt.
Oh, that's really nice. Well, this is an exciting advance in the field, and you're really at the forefront of it. And your students are lucky that they have this available to them. So thanks very much for being with us and sharing your experience.
Well, what the big secret about this is, Kelly, is this is fantastic. I love doing it. Our med school really values it. But it's a lot of fun. That's the thing. It's
you can tell. You can tell just by the way you're talking about it.
It is so much fun. And again, I just saw all my students that were graduating. And some of these I hadn't seen in 3 years. And they're like, doing doctors in the kitchen and then seeing patients, they're cooking and being able to relate to them in those ways. I just have a text from one of my students going to family medicine and she's like, this changed the trajectory of my career. And I'm not taking credit for that, but just the idea of giving that experience, I think especially in my world, the medical students absolutely love it. In the end, it's a hell of a lot of fun. So,
I bet. Well, it's a sign of something really good happening in the field. So thanks again for being with us. So our guest today has been Dr. Joseph Skelton, professor of pediatrics at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. Thanks to our listeners for being with us, and of course, thanks to Deborah Hill for her great work in producing this series. I'm Kelly Brownell.
Thank you for listening to the Leading Voices in Food podcast. This program is an educational series produced by Duke University's World Food Policy Center with the goal of promoting productive conversation for food systems change. If you would like to subscribe, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, or your favorite podcast app. Transcripts are also available on the website of the Duke World Food Policy Center.